Spencer,
Hello.
we got a shout out.
What is it?
This shout out is from actually, let me rewind. Hey guys, sometimes we do shout outs. If you go to shop.whatifpodcast.com, you could toss us 50 bones and we'll read
almost anything.
60-second version of pretty much almost anything. This week's is from Joss. Joss is from Off the Cutting Room Floor. And Josh says, my entire life I've loved researching behind the scenes stories and legends surrounding films. Now I've decided to tell some of my favorites on my new podcast, Off the Cutting Room Floor, featuring a cast with some of my favorite podcasters, parentheses, no Ryan or Spencer. I'm sorry, I thought they'd be too busy. Which, you know what, Joss? I'm going to tell you what. You're right. We literally barely have enough time to do this show. So we are probably too busy. But you know what? Maybe sometime. Season 1 takes a look at the musical Little Shop of Horrors and some of the biggest changes and revisions made during development, examining everything from the creation of the musical's Dark Side of Grease score to what the fuck actually happened with the film's ending. This first season has been in the work for legit 3 years, and I've been able to uncover some amazing things, and I'm so excited to finally get these stories out into the world. Season 2 might be about a couple of Nazis taken down by their own hubris while trying to make a propaganda Titanic film. It's a real shit show.
Sounds like it.
Joss, it sounds fucking awesome. If you want to get down on some awesome, check out Off the Cutting Room Floor. It's a bite-sized history podcast. You can find it on social at OTC Room Pod. And season 1, Little Shop of Horrors, can be found on your pod catcher of choice with new episodes every Friday starting January 3rd of this year. So you got a couple to go get down on before you keep it rolling. That's it. That's all we got for shout-outs this week. Thanks, Jess.
Okay,
Get
bye.
back to the show.
Whole program's cocked.
True Deckard.
Captain's log. Episode 168. We still don't know what the fuck we're doing out here.
We've officially...
Can't even hit record on the goddamn podcast.
Retrospective. Episode 67. We thought we were Two Deckard. It turns out, some 100 episodes later, we are, in fact, Two Deckard, bud.
How did they never figure this shit out? A what if podcast story.
What if they never
got better?
What if they never got their shit together? Oh, and here we are.
Hi, how are you?
Kicking ass and taking names. What's up, man?
I'm Spencer. That's Ryan. This is What If.
Brr.
You like how on episode 163 I started introducing us in the show?
I like how I did it for the first 100 episodes, and you were like, that shit's weird, dude. Why you introduce us? And I was like, because people probably want to know who we are when we talk to them. And now you're like 100 episodes later. He was right that whole time.
Ryan, remember. What if I taught you?
Which part?
The one thing I've taught you about this podcast. We don't owe
anyone anything.
These people shit.
Gotta.
I waited so long. What did you do to these? That sat still for like a solid 15 minutes.
It blew up more than mine.
What the fuck did you do to these beers?
Waiting made it worse.
I haven't had a beer in 5 weeks,
Jesus,
and I just poured my first one all over my own carpet.
That was so awesome to watch, you guys. I'm sorry this is a podcast because
At least we already had the goddamn paper towels in here.
It was like a fucking grenade. Holy shit, bud.
Ryan handed me a fucking
Oh, man.
Weasley joke beer.
A Weasley joke beer.
No, Fred and George Weasley.
Oh, Weasley joke beer.
Listen to the Harry Potter audiobooks.
Got it. I thought you were calling me like a Weasley young fella.
What's their shop of like, their joke and novelty shop that they start after they drop out of Hogwarts?
The Weasley brothers.
You know what I mean.
Bertie Blotts. No, that's something else.
Yeah, that thing.
Isn't it something else? I don't remember. Whoa,
Hi,
sorry, gang.
we're here.
My beer blew up before the episode started. Spencer's blew up.
I waited a good 15 minutes, and mine was 10 times worse.
It was a grenade. You caught a grenade.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, here we are,
Hi,
everybody.
friends.
What's going on?
I've been spending most of my time watching The Good Place lately.
Sick. My wife watches that show and
Have
loves
you seen
it.
it?
No.
Oh, boy, it's worth it.
Okay.
I've watched 2 seasons in the last 3 days.
Oh, buddy, look at you go.
Yeah.
All right.
It's good stuff.
I mean, I was already planning on it with her cosign, but I think it's been co-signed by enough people at this point. I got to give it a go.
Yeah. I got finally shamed into it by like literally everyone that I know and love and trust,
and
telling
like,
me that I would enjoy this show.
And you're like, okay, at this
turns
point.
out it's a fantastic show.
It's about like heaven and hell and death and shit, right?
Yeah.
Right up my fucking
Well, it's like the perfect
alley.
No, it's the perfect show for me because it's fun and funny and smart, and like it's a few main characters that are all like really pulling for each other.
Mm-hmm.
It's very it's like it's the opposite of stress entertainment.
Yeah.
Which is usually what I'm going for.
We've talked about that before. Fuck being anxious when you watch things, because I'm anxious all the time anyway.
Exactly.
I need to add anxiety to my life when I watch entertainment. That's not entertainment, that's anxiety.
Hey, you want to feel bad? Yeah, it's free. Just stare at this thing for an hour.
Bro, I want to go to a movie and just yell, that's not entertainment, that's anxiety.
That's how I felt. That's how I feel watching even like fucking heist movies are too stressful for me, man. I have no tolerance.
I do like a good heist movie.
I just need like friends telling each other jokes and hugging. That's like the only kind of entertainment I can handle.
And that's why literally we make this show, because it's exactly what we do.
Or I need like sci-fi, but only the like utopia kind, like Star Trek: The Next Generation, not like Blade Runner.
I heard there's that new Showtime.
Oh.
No, there's a new Showtime show that's like a comedy. It's like a Star Trek-esque comedy show.
I got nothing.
It's supposed to be funny.
I had a Showtime subscription for like 2 months to watch my own shit, and then I canceled it.
That's tight. That's so baller, bro. How did you not work that into the contract? Hey, if I'm gonna have music on a Showtime show, I'm gonna need some Showtime out of it.
I did get a promo code for a free 30-day trial. It's only 7 days normally. I waited till it came out. I watched it. I guess it was enough. I made it work.
Hot, but
no, I mean, they paid me.
I know. I know. I'm just saying
man,
that should also be part of it.
You want to write some music? We got a free 30-day trial for you. We got an AOL CD for you.
Motherfucker, what am I, 18? Get the fuck out of here.
AOL 4.0. We got as many CDs as you want, bro. We got anything we got to talk about before we talk about Bud's goofy ass?
I don't know. I don't think we have any announcements. We gotta man, we keep getting so many voicemails, and hey, I want to say something really quick. We always talk about our voicemail number, and I know we don't always play voicemails on here. Y'all should know that part of the Patreon, we put out 2 episodes a week. This is the free one. The paid one comes out on Fridays. It's at patreon.com/whatifpodcast. It's only $5 a month. Yeah. That one is a lot more like us being conversational and like talking about more stuff, and we play a lot of voicemails on there. So if you've called us and left us a voicemail, we damn well may have played it on the Patreon. So I don't know. That's not a sell to get people over there. That's more saying like we don't never play voicemails. Hey, look, we just play them over there.
If you like us and you want to talk to us, we will extort you. Okay. Is what Ryan is saying.
Breath, fuckery, and extortion. That's the only reason we're here. But yeah, if you do want to leave us a voicemail, 612-246-4614, or emails are hi@whatifpodcast.com. We got a dope ass email from Chile this morning, dude. How cool is that? People in Chile listen to our show.
Oh, like Chile, the country.
Yeah.
Not Chili Davis.
Yeah, sorry, Chile. I didn't put the stank on it like you did.
It's not putting stank on it. It's saying the wrong word.
I'm just kidding. But shout out to Poli from Chile. It's tight that people in all kinds of weird places.
Hey, while we're here, do you have the copy for the thing that we've forgotten to do the last few weeks? Okay, cool.
Yeah, we'll get
great.
Got him.
All right. Well, let's talk about some people being abducted by UFOs.
Fucking A crowbar.
Let's talk about Linda Cortile.
Okay, wait, I'm sorry. I'm going to stop you quick.
I didn't get very far, but go ahead. I got 2 words.
We haven't done I don't feel like we've done an abduction story in a hot minute. It's been a while. It's been a while, I think. Is that fair?
Well, we did who was the Canadian bloke who saw who got burned on the chest by a UFO?
Big fan of mixing Canadian and bloke together.
You're welcome.
Huge choice. Very into
He didn't
it.
get abducted, but
he had an interaction.
We talked
had an
about
experience.
We talked about a UFO maybe 5 or 6 weeks ago.
That's true, but we haven't done like a true abduction story in a hot minute.
Yeah.
That's one. Number two, this fucking story is the most bizarre, like fucking spaghetti ass, messy, weird,
very messy, bro.
Fucking thing we've maybe ever talked about.
Yes.
And I'm gonna need your help because I don't even know where to start.
I'm not sure I do either, but
let's jump in.
We are going to start
2 feet
here. So Linda Cortile was originally an alias that Linda Napolitano. Napolitano.
Nailed it.
Linda. She wakes up one night in her bed in Manhattan.
Yes.
And she sees a person / maybe an alien standing at the foot of her bed.
Thanks, I'd rather not.
And she sees her husband sleeping next to her in the same bed. This alien guy takes her away to some sort of examination room. She's not sure where this physically is located.
Basic gray, right?
Yeah, more or less. Again, it's hard to even like say with any certainty the details of the story because we'll get there. She's in some sort of exam room where she sees more aliens. She's on a table, and then she's back in her bed. Her husband is still asleep next to her. The next morning, she thinks to herself, like, that was super weird. That didn't feel like a dream. That felt real.
Yeah.
What do I do? Mm-hmm. And she read a book by Budd Hopkins called Intruders, which is about alien abduction.
To clarify, she read it because of her experience. She had not previously read the book?
I'm not sure.
Okay.
She was aware of Budd Hopkins prior to this incident.
Sure.
Whether she read Intruders before or after, I'm not sure. If it was like, I know about Budd Hopkins, whoa, this crazy shit happened.
Right.
The only guy I know who talks about aliens is Budd Hopkins. I should read his book.
Right.
I think that's the order of operations here, but
I'm with you.
I don't know. And she, after reading Intruders, decides to get in touch with Budd Hopkins because she thinks maybe he can help her understand what she experienced.
Man.
She does, and he's willing to meet with her and work with her. And under hypnosis, which always gets dicey for me, she recalls being levitated out of her bedroom through the window and hovering across through the air outside of her apartment.
Yeah.
Into this UFO that was hovering next to her apartment.
Yeah, lit.
And was then upon this UFO subjected to some experiments of some medical nature by a bunch of little aliens.
Do we want to read her clam quote?
Clam quote?
She called it a clam.
I don't know the clam quote, so if you'd like to lead us in a clam quote, I guess now would be a good time.
My time to shine. This is a quote from her from later on under hypnosis where she said, "I'm standing up on nothing and they take me out all the way out, way above the building. Oh, I hope I don't fall. The UFO opens up almost like a clam, and then I'm inside, and I see benches similar to regular benches," which is an awesome quote.
Benches, like benches.
Can we put on the list benches similar to regular benches? Because I feel like that's a pretty cool name.
Yes. In the good place.
Yes.
you can't cuss in the good place, right? So if you try to, your speech is auto-corrected to a similar word. And so anytime you try and say bitch, it says bench.
Got it.
Just makes that more fun.
Benches similar to regular benches?
Bitches similar to regular bitches.
But benches.
Yeah, us. Regular bitches.
She says, and they're bringing me down a hallway. Doors,
similar to a regular hallway.
Right. Doors open like sliding doors.
Like regular doors.
Similar to regular sliding doors. Inside are all these lights. Similar to... No, inside are all these lights and buttons and a big long table. I don't want to get on the table, but they get me on the table anyway. They start saying things to me and I'm yelling. I can still yell. One of them says something that sounds like knobby egg.
Oh, yeah, I do know this quote.
I think they were trying to tell me to be quiet because he put his hand over my mouth.
Knobby egg has to be on the list.
I guess. It's a weird one.
I'll
allow it.
Yeah. Just to go back a step, this happened on November 30th of 1989.
Yes.
Sometime in the middle of the night, maybe 3 a.m.-ish.
Yeah. The reports are anywhere from like 2:30 to 3 or 3:15.
So this happens in November. I think she gets in touch with Budd Hopkins within a month or two.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think it's like top of the year.
Yeah. A year after this, so the following November or early December, Hopkins gets a letter from two people who identified themselves as Richard and Dan, who claim that they actually saw Linda being abducted out of her window.
They originally identified themselves as NYPD police officers who were on patrol in the area that night.
Their story is particularly messy.
Oh, big time, Bud. Big time, Bud. And we'll talk about it later, but the reason they originally identified themselves as such is because they were connected to a third person that they didn't want to have to reveal in their communication.
Don't tell my lawyer we kill people, man.
Yes.
So
Yes.
these two guys corroborate Linda's story more or less. They claim that they saw her float out of her window. Let's see. I have a quote from Richard. There was an oval-shaped object hovering over the top of the apartment building 2 or 3 blocks up from where we sat. We didn't know where it came from. It happened too fast. Its lights turned from a bright reddish orange to a whitish blue coming out of the bottom. Green lights rotated around the edge of the saucer. A little girl or woman wearing a white gown sailed out of the window in a fetal position and then stood in midair in this beam of light. I could see 3 of the ugliest creatures I ever saw. I don't know what they were. They weren't human. Their heads were out of proportion, very large heads with no hair. Those buggers were escorting her into the craft. My partner screamed, "We've got to go get them." We tried to get out of the car, but couldn't. After the woman was escorted in, the oval turned reddish-orange again and whisked off. So that's what they claim to have seen on the evening of November 30th from about 3 blocks away from Linda's apartment.
Yeah, and
First question about this alleged corroborating evidence. If you are 3 blocks away from someone, can you see their hair?
So I've heard the about 3 blocks away thing too, but I actually looked pretty intensely at a map to see technically where they said they were, and it's more like 1.5.
Okay.
And they're like pretty
This is also happening up in the air, correct? So you have vertical distance as well?
yeah, we didn't get, or at least not that I saw, I didn't read anywhere what floor this was happening on, which would change things pretty significantly. I mean, obviously,
he said the thing was hovering over the building.
right, but I'm saying I don't know, did she come out of the 15th floor and go all the way up, or did she come out of the 4th floor and go all the way up? Because that's a different...
Oh, I see. So maybe she started out closer to them.
Right. I mean,
yeah.
If she came out of the 30th floor of an apartment building, yeah, you're for sure not seeing hair. But if
It
you're a
just
block and
seems-
a half away and something just flies out of like a 3rd floor or 4th floor, you'd be like, what the fuck?
Even within the context of this quote, though, you can't tell whether it's a child or an adult woman, but you can see that the little, even smaller than the person creatures are bald.
So I definitely agree with you that
It just seems odd.
It seems odd and it seems messy. I will say though, like, I think we've all probably had situations where like something pretty crazy happens to you, and the more you tell the story, the more like crystallized the details become, whether or not they're like true memories of it.
That's my point, though.
Well, yeah. But I mean, I'm just saying, like, I'm saying I don't necessarily think it necessarily entirely invalidates the take as much as it is one of those situations where it's like something can crystallize over time in a way that may not have been like a perfectly accurate representation of the initial situation.
Right. And my point is, I don't think this is a totally accurate representation of this alleged situation.
Right. And I guess what I'm trying to say is somebody still could have come flying out the window, and the blonde flowing hair thing might have been a little bit of a, you know. Do you know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah. I'm just already highly skeptical of these people who have never even been confirmed to exist, first of all.
That is true. We have no evidence of Richard and Dan actually existing.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
So the story about who these guys are has changed over time as well. Initially, well, I don't know. I don't even know the order of these things. The two men were apparently bodyguards for a United Nations statesman who was visiting Manhattan.
Yeah.
Someone who was eventually identified as Javier Perez de
Cuellar.
Thank you. Who, according to the two men who wrote this letter, Richard and Dan, also witnessed this event.
Now, it is true that Cuellar was a Peruvian politician and a diplomat, and he was also the fifth Secretary General of the United Nations, and he was also in New York the night of this incident. So
that's fine.
I'm just I'm not defending anything. I'm just saying those are all true things. Cuellar was born in 1920 and he's still alive, which is pretty wild.
Damn.
He's a hundo.
Well,
no, he actually is a hundo though.
He's got an early birthday.
He's a hundo.
Good for him.
Yeah. He was born, I can tell you. Never mind, I can't. I closed it.
He was born sometime prior to February 5th.
Mm-hmm. January 19th.
There it is.
Shout out to Nick Mesta. That's his birthday too.
Cool.
Just saying. I'm just saw it.
These two guys, and I don't know, could you find where this information about Richard and Dan was coming from? Is this being reported by Hopkins, by Linda, by...
Yeah, so should we introduce Budd Hopkins fully to the situation?
Sure. So a lot of this came out through a book that Budd Hopkins wrote about this whole ordeal that was titled, help me out.
Have we talked much about Budd on the show? I feel like we haven't.
I don't think so.
Hang on.
Intruders was the first book. This was called...
Hang on, I've got it.
I do too, but, you know. This is extra bad because I've read this book.
Witnessed
There
the true
it is.
story of the Brooklyn Bridge UFO abductions. It came out in 1996, 7 years after Linda's initial experience.
I read that whole book on an airplane like 15 years ago. So I think most of this information is coming from Budd's book about this event.
Yeah, and Budd says that Richard and Dan got in touch with him via letters and started sending him letters about their experience.
Yeah.
And they were corresponding that way, which, I mean, at the time, like, you know, I guess we're a little pre-internet at that point. So, yeah, you're probably...
Early internet, yeah.
Yeah, early internet. So you're probably doing more of that than you are, like, corresponding via text message or email.
Well, and if you don't necessarily want your identity known right away, you're probably not calling someone or whatever.
Right.
I have a couple issues with Budd's involvement or Budd's involvement makes me question the validity of this story in a couple ways.
Sure.
The first being that he has made a significant amount of money off of this story.
Sure.
So he has a huge incentive to have this be a good story.
Enhance. Computer, enhance.
The second being that Budd Hopkins was a great proponent of using hypnosis and hypnotic regression in an attempt to uncover repressed memory, specifically relating to alien UFO encounters and abductions.
Yeah, and we've talked, I would say, at length about some of the problems with hypnotic regression and the potential to lead and implant and conflate. I would
love to someday talk to an expert in hypnotic regression or someone more familiar with the actual brain processes that are happening during a hypnotic regression.
Yeah.
But as far as I'm aware, there's no good evidence to support hypnotic regression being like a what's the word I'm looking for?
Effective
or like effective in the sense of recovering accurate memory.
Yeah, you could take somebody on a tour of their brain, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you're exposing like actual memory that has been locked away. I have a problem with that concept in general, that we as human beings are capable of storing crystal clear memories that we somehow like don't have access to, but that through like guidance, you can access a crystal clear memory. Like I'm an idiot and I don't like, to your point, we should talk to an expert on it, but I've never been like, I don't know, I guess, I mean, yes, like sometimes someone will be like, hey, do you remember that thing that'll like jog your memory? But I've never gone from, oh yeah, I kind of remember that, or oh yeah, that's right, we did do that for that party when I was in 5th grade or whatever. But I've never been like, oh yeah, and then at that moment I walked out the door and then I went up the stairs and like,
and everyone's license plates are burned into my memory somewhere.
Exactly. Like there's a degree of specificity that these situations, quote unquote, uncover that I feel extremely skeptical about.
Going back to Harry Potter for a moment, it's like
let's
the way it's depicted so often, it being hypnotic regression, is like looking into the dang pensive, and you're reliving the situation exactly as it actually happened, as if there's even an objective way that one situation happens.
Right.
Because you're going to view it from every person has their own point of view, even of the same situation. So it's not like, even if that were possible, you could go back and view an objective replay of this scenario.
Right.
But that's how it's often presented in these types of cases.
Right.
So anyway, on top of that, Budd Hopkins was not trained as a hypnotist or as a scientist or anything close to it. My man had an art history degree. Which is not to shit on the arts, but like it doesn't qualify you to be hypnotizing people.
No,
and
he did
be playing psychotherapist.
No, he did have 8 years of experience studying the concepts by sitting in on other people's hypnotisms and regressions and stuff like that. But no, I mean,
he's a pretty good painter though.
Yeah, I haven't seen his.
It's not bad.
All right. Yeah, that's cool. But yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the interesting problems with this story is the vast majority of the information about Linda. Well, are we calling her Colita or sorry, not Colita, Cortile or Napolitano?
Whatever.
She's both or neither or whatever.
I mean, I think in Budd's book she was Cortile.
Got it.
But I think her actual name is Neapolitan. What was it?
Napolitano.
I think that's her actual name, correct?
Yeah, well, I think one was a former name, but I'm not entirely sure.
I thought Cortile was an alias.
Oh, was it?
I think so.
Oh, got it.
Anyway,
a lot of this is filtered through him, I guess is what we're trying to say, which
all
is...
of it is, except when they did presentations together, which to me is still like a little iffy. And also she, at one point, claimed that they were splitting the profits of his book 50-50.
Oh, that's interesting. There are also some additional witnesses in the situation, and we'll get to one of them later. But go ahead.
Should we go down the rest of the Richard and Dan road first?
Yeah, let's do that. We should probably finish telling the story in whole.
Pretty wild.
Yes.
So they get Hopkins gets this letter from these two people claiming to be bodyguards for a UN diplomat who claim to have witnessed this abduction. And one of the two, I'm not sure which, started to sort of lose it, and specifically in regards to Linda.
It was Dan.
Dan? Okay. Dan thought that Linda had some sort of superpowers tied to her abduction experience.
Yeah, and not just like superpowers, but thought that she was communing with the aliens that had abducted her, or like had a connection to them, potentially an ongoing connection to them. At one point in the book, he refers to her as a half-breed, as in like he potentially believed that she was part alien of some kind.
Human-alien hybrid?
Yeah.
So as a result of this thinking, he starts stalking... What?
Just the way you delivered that was just as a result of this thinking. It's just a very this guy's.
He starts stalking Linda and eventually kidnaps her more than once.
The first time it says the first time I read that Dan and Richard quote kidnapped her together.
Oh, okay.
Which was apparently more of they went to her apartment, asked her to go on a ride with them, and they basically like kept her from going home for 3 hours and grilled her in the car about her experience and what she knew.
I mean, that sounds like kidnapping.
Yeah, no, it definitely is. I just mean like it was less like we're gonna like chain you to a pole in a basement and keep you here forever type kidnapping, and more like we're gonna take you against your will for a short period of time because we think you have like information or something like that. Not cool. Very not cool. Don't do this. But I'm just saying different.
Detail about this first kidnapping. They thought she worked for the government and then also asked her to take off her shoes so that they could examine her feet because aliens don't have toes.
Sick.
So if you got toes...
According to who?
Dan and Richard, Dick and Dan,
with all the aliens they've seen in their lives,
none of them had toes.
Apparently not.
Or every human they've seen does have toes. Therefore, no toes, alien.
Got it. Makes complete and total sense, and I'm fully on board.
Linda remembered another car being involved with this first kidnapping, so they like pulled up next to her on the street and forced her into this car, drove around for 3.5 hours talking to her.
Is that maybe I'm conflating that one with the fact that they actually went and visited her at her apartment then. That's what it was. Before they kidnapped her, they went and visited her.
Okay.
But here's what I want to know. How did they know who she was? Because
for those of you that can't see,
Spencer just threw two hands up in the air.
I'm shrugging at Ryan as if to say, I don't fucking know. They wouldn't have.
Right. Because ostensibly this all happened before or during the Budd times, but Budd wouldn't have told these fucking
Budd times.
Budd times.
Sounds like fun.
But that's what we should call the show. Hey guys, it's Budd times. But Budd wouldn't have just been like, oh, here's the name and address of the woman. Well, unless he would have if he was a fucking.
So I don't know
goober.
when. So this says April of 91 was when she got kidnapped.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a year and a half after the incident.
Right.
She did do some presentations with Budd.
Like right after the fact.
I don't know when they happened, but she was doing some like MUFON and conference type presentations publicly talking about her experience.
When was the first letter from Richard and Dan sent to Budd?
I don't know. Let me see.
Let me see if I can find it.
April, she was kidnapped. What I have just says more than a year after the experience. So that would put it like late 90, early 91. And then in April of 91, she was kidnapped the first time.
So particularly in that situation, and especially if she was potentially doing interviews or showing up to MUFON events early on, because for what it's worth, for those that don't know, Budd was the director of MUFON New York at the time of this incident.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. So if she was doing MUFON events with him at the time, there's a possibility that they could have learned or seen. Yeah. And that just delegitimizes the thing entirely, because it's like, if this was a case that was, putting it in quotation, like publicly known, but like known amongst a sphere of people who were showing up to MUFON events, how can you take any of the rest of what follows credibly?
That reminded me of one other issue I forgot to bring up with in regards to why I just don't really trust Budd Hopkins.
Yes. I like that we're totally just shitting on Budd Hopkins and we haven't even like fully finished telling the story itself.
It's, we'll mention it as it comes up.
Yeah.
I think if someone presented a story like this to me with some pretty specific pieces of information in terms of where it happened, when it happened, who else was present, like there's some verifiable facts in her story.
Sure.
Right. She lived in a relatively large building with 1,600-ish other people.
It's New York City, dead between the Manhattan Bridge and the Brooklyn Bridge.
Yeah.
Almost like right on the water.
Like one of the densest parts of the entire country.
Yeah.
The entire world. Yes, it's 3 a.m, but you know how many people are awake and outside at 3 a.m. in Manhattan?
Yeah.
A bunch.
That city doesn't sleep, as you've heard.
And if there is really a large object shining lights on apartment buildings, hovering above apartment buildings, more than 3 people would have noticed. Well, so going back to Budd, wouldn't your first inclination be to try and verify any piece of her story in terms of her husband, who apparently slept through this whole thing? You might want to talk to him. You might want to talk to neighbors or these people who are writing to you. You're just going to take anonymous strangers at their word for everything that they're saying. You're going to take her at her word for everything that she's saying. Are you going to verify even like what were weather conditions that night?
Sure.
Would this have even been visible from 2 blocks away?
Sure.
There are just so many, like this dude doesn't appear to have investigated anything in like a traditional investigative sense and jumped straight to, let's just hypnotically regress her and see what she says and take that as fact.
Okay, so I appreciate what you're saying generally. Technically, that's not exactly true, because in Witnessed, and I haven't read the book, but I found a really good like distillation of all of the witnesses. And there in the book, he says he spoke to in total 23 individual witnesses that are some version of an eyewitness to some portion of Linda's story.
But is that including like are Richard and Dan on that list?
Yes.
You know, so it's an anonymous letter.
Right.
That's not interviewing someone.
Okay, but here's an example. Okay, let me give you one example. He interviewed a reporter named Steve Dunleavy in late 2002, who was an investigative reporter for the New York Post. And he had seen the procession of limousines along South Street the night of the event that were supposedly stopped because people's cars had stopped. We didn't talk about the fact that there was supposedly a blackout that night in the middle of the night, that people were like stopping and getting out of their cars because there was a blackout happening in New York City in the middle of the night that night. Did you hear that part of things?
No. So even more people should have seen this?
Probably if there was a bright ass light, but the point that he tries to make throughout the course of the book was is that like there were 23 individual people who saw some portion of this.
What does that mean though? Some portion?
Like this reporter Steve Dunleavy said that he saw the stopped series of limousines outside of her building that were supposedly stopped because people were up front looking at this thing happening.
Come on.
I'm not saying it's right. I'm just saying.
I'm not saying come on to you. I'm saying come on to him.
Yeah.
Of like a fucking traffic jam in New York means that a woman got abducted by aliens.
Right.
Also, if they were all stopped staring up at a fucking alien spaceship in the sky,
right,
you didn't turn your head to also look at the alien spaceship in the sky?
Right. No, I get it.
Like, that's not a witness.
He interviews Yancey Spence, who do you want me to tell the Yancey Spence story really quick?
Yes, please.
Okay. So, Yancey Spence was a delivery driver for the New York Post at the time of Linda Cortile's abduction. And in, let me find the year really quick, late 2001, Yancey Spence published an op-ed in what was at the time called UFO Magazine.
I'm very concise to the point.
So,
I like it.
Yeah.
What's it about? UFOs. What is it? Magazine.
It's a magazine.
We're done
and done. The Day Manhattan Stood Still, a true eyewitness account of the South Street abductions. I'm going to read a chunk of it.
Okay.
Yancey basically, the story that Yancey tells is he was taking the Manhattan Bridge back into Manhattan the night that Linda got abducted, and that multiple people on the bridge with him at the time saw something strange. He says, to get back to the plant, I took the Manhattan Bridge, and at that time, both lanes under the pedestrian walkway were carrying Manhattan-bound traffic. At exactly 3:15 a.m., I was a third of the way over the crest with no traffic ahead of me when my truck lights and engine shut down and the truck coasted to a stop. I tried the emergency lights, but they didn't work either. I looked into my side view mirror to see who was going to pile into me, but then saw all of the headlights of the vehicles behind me go out, and they also slowly coasted to a stop. It felt like everything was going in slow motion. The bridge's lights went out and everything went dark. In retrospect, I believe that a power grid in lower Manhattan had shut down. It was an eerie sight to say the least, but outside of my window, I caught sight of a beam of red light playing across the nearby buildings.
Sorry, can I stop you for 1 second?
Yes.
That wouldn't affect cars and vehicles.
No, it wouldn't, but I think he's making a case for like this was extra weird. There was something going on.
No, right. But sorry, go back like 2 sentences where he said something about the power grid.
He said the bridge lights went out and everything went dark. And in retrospect, I believe that a power grid in lower Manhattan had shut down.
But didn't he say that his vehicle and other vehicles also stopped at the same time?
Yes, I think he's saying.
So it couldn't be that. But he's saying that's what he thought at the time.
At the time, like maybe a bunch of cars were dying weirdly because there was a thing going on, or I don't know.
Okay.
But apparently there was power going out too. The light changed he says, it was an eerie sight to say the least. Outside of my window, I caught sight of a beam of red light playing across the nearby buildings. The light changed to a greenish-white color and became pencil thin as it traveled across the building facades. Whoever was outside at the time had to see it because this beam of light was the only power source working in the blackout. One of my thoughts was this must be some kind of laser test that the Brooklyn Navy Yard was conducting, but the source of the light stopped before the East River. The shape of the light kept changing from an oblong oval to a perfect circle and focused in on one of the top floors of a nearby building. And I actually forgot. I have a picture of the building itself that she was abducted out of, and it's like 8 floors tall, for what it's worth.
Okay.
At first, I couldn't make out what building it was, but as if to answer my thoughts, the beam of light shot down to street level and ran the length of the block, exposing 2 sets of distinctive 15-foot-high inverted metal fishhook gates. He's talking about the building, trying to figure out what building it was based on what was being illuminated. He says the light beam then shot back up to the top floor of the center building, the one with an exposed water tank, and focused on the bottom half of a double-pane window. There was a window to the right of it that was half the size, probably a bathroom window, and this greenish-white beam of light started to go brighter and more intense. Okay, so this gets to your point. He says, this beam of light started to grow brighter and more intense, and then for some reason I looked out my side view mirror, and at that instant the sky lit up. I saw maybe 24 people who were now outside of their stalled vehicles, and the flash illuminated them through the bridge's superstructure. Some of them were screaming and looked like crazed birds locked in cages as others pointed back towards the Knickerbocker. It was surreal, and it scared the hell out of me. So this guy is describing stopped traffic on the Manhattan Bridge with a power outage and people seeing this freaky light come down over a building, like screaming.
What you talking about, freaky woman? Oh, yelling? You like yelling, woman?
Yes.
Okay.
So, go ahead.
Well, 2 questions.
Yes.
Or maybe a 2-part question. If dozens of people are witnessing this,
Yes.
no one said anything about it until 5 years after this book is out and this story is made the rounds.
For sure. I mean, like, that's 100% the right criticism to have of this article.
This
it's
dude
one of those,
waited 20 years to say something about it.
It's an extremely, like, flowery written, like, very, I mean, and again,
sorry, 10 years? You said 01?
I think 02. I think this edition came out, but
10 to 12ish years.
10 to 12 years,
a decade plus to say anything about it.
right? And I think, to your point, he in this moment is going, there's a shitload of people who saw this fucking fucked up freaky thing happening.
You didn't go talk to any of them and be like, hey, what do you think that was?
He says, within the bluish white light coming off the Knickerbocker, there were balls ascending upward in an arrowhead formation.
What is the Knickerbocker?
It's the building itself that they saw the light hitting. They were tumbling, and as they got closer to the source of the light, the balls opened up like blooming flowers. I could see there were 3 gray aliens in dark jumpsuits in a triangular formation surrounding an angelic-looking dark-haired woman in a white gown.
No, you didn't. You could see what they were wearing
from the bridge, halfway across the bridge.
Sam, no, you didn't.
I know, bro. This article specifically is so
you just didn't
absurd to me because it gets back to your point of, like, it seems like there's this very carefully curated list of witnesses of this thing that happened, but yet most of them go through Budd. This one is one of the only ones that's a third party, like UFO Magazine published this account, but we don't know who this fucking Yancey person is. We don't know who wrote it. We don't, like, there's not an interview that you can go read with between Budd and Yancey and, like, talking about what they saw.
Came out 5 years after a best-selling book about the same event.
And 12 years after the event itself actually happened. And, like, tell me, if you were on Lake Street Bridge and you were looking towards the west and all of a sudden you saw massive chunks of South Minneapolis's power go out and then a fucking crazy, like, fucked up light, like, you're not calling the police at some point?
First of all,
okay, we don't really call the police here, but do you know what I mean?
I'm talking to one of the other 36 people stopped on the bridge with me because our cars all simultaneously died.
Right. In the middle of the Manhattan Bridge.
I'm not waiting 10 years to write a fucking op-ed in a weird magazine about it.
Right. But you know what? But I guess what I mean about the police thing is I'm saying, like, not one of those people decided to call the police that night and be like, hey, some fucked up shit happened. I'm going to report this. Like, because that's a thing you could go query or figure out, if there were more reports of that happening that night. I don't know.
Or you could talk to one of those dozens of people that apparently watched this whole thing happen and saw little guys in jumpsuits.
Dark jumpsuits.
Which is not what the other 3 guys described.
I know.
For the record.
I know, dude. I'm saying.
So anyway, back to the kidnapping. She had toes, so Linda's not an alien. She got toes.
Perfect.
In October of 91, so 4 months later, 6 months later, Dan kidnaps Linda again.
Bro,
and
give it a rest, Daniel.
Yeah, Dan needs help.
Can you cut it out for us, Daniel?
And at the time, he again pulls up next to her on the street, forces her into his car, and Linda has a tape recorder just on her person at the time.
Apparently she was working with somebody because she felt like she was being stalked by Richard and Dan that had told her to keep it on her person in case they approached her.
You know what? Not a bad idea.
So that she could report it to the police and say, this is what these guys are coming up to me and saying and doing.
Yeah, reasonable.
Yeah.
So anyway, she has a tape recorder on her for that reason, I suppose, and is able to record a few minutes of this conversation that they have once she's in the car. But he finds a tape recorder and takes it, apparently. He drives to some beach house on Long Island.
This is the bizarro, fucking far gone shit.
This next part is very weird and unfortunate. He allegedly demanded that she put on a white nightgown similar to a nightgown that she wore on the night she was abducted.
Thanks, I hate it. Sounds like a horror movie. I hate it.
She did, and Dan then drops to his knees and starts talking incoherently about her being, quote, the Lady of the Sands. She ran away from Dan at this point, which I totally understand.
God bless.
Dan runs after her, catches up, and tries to drown her in the ocean.
Dan, this is considered a dick move.
Well, I mean, this is considered attempted murder.
Also this.
After the second time that he tries to push her into the ocean or push her face under the ocean, Dan is hit by some sort of, quote, force, and he's knocked back onto the beach. Linda runs away and looks back at one point to see Dan taking a photograph of her. She continues running away, and then Richard shows up next to her, stops her, convinces her to go back to the beach house, and then Richard and Dan... this story is so goofy.
I know.
They go back to the beach house. Linda searches the beach house while all 3 of them are there, finds another cassette tape and stationery bearing a CIA letterhead.
Yeah. So I saw.
Hey, we just opened a beer without spilling it.
I'm so proud of both of us.
Party on.
So proud of both of us.
I'm still 0 for 1, but you're 1 for 2 now.
You need another one?
You're bringing our average up a whole octave.
Here, take this one. I'll open it for you, and let's see if we can keep our average up.
I need a beer chaperone. Took a month off of drinking and forgot how to do it.
Oh, you mean a chaperone? Nailed it.
Yeah, it's about as good as we're going to get. So I don't know what the fuck that means, but...
Yeah, there's a weird part in the book where, and again, I haven't read it. I've read all the Cliff Notes, versions of it, the synopsis.
I don't know where. I think my copy's at my dad's house somewhere. I tried to find one this week, and they're expensive on eBay now. And
your dad's getting hype right now, bro.
He probably brought it to Goodwill.
But the point that the book is trying to make at this point is that or I guess my interpretation is the point that the book is trying to make at this point is Dan and Richard are either former or existing CIA officers who are potentially part of like some disinformation thing where they're trying to like mess with her and like figure out what she knows.
But
and,
also
like,
maybe working for the UN.
Yeah. Or maybe they never worked for the UN and that was an additional cover story or whatever. Like, I think that's what is trying to be insinuated, which, like, just for a second to play the actual what if card is an interesting concept that if this woman actually did have a crazy experience and there was some sort of like Men in Blackish-esque thing that they were putting forth, they were basically trying to make her feel crazy, like that this would be a way to do it, to like stalk her and grill her and kidnap her multiple times and like...
Can't you just give people some LSD like the old days?
I mean, if
like
only.
the good old days where there's just free acid.
If only. But do you know what I mean, though? Like, again, like,
yeah,
to fully devil's advocate the situation, if there was something going on, or if she had an experience of some kind, and they wanted her to like stop talking about it or feel, uncomfortable or be received as crazy, that would be a way to do it. Would be to be like, these two guys saw the thing you saw, and they're going to talk to you about the thing you saw and ask you questions about the thing you saw, and like,
but actually, they're going to kidnap you and try and drown you in the ocean.
Yeah, like,
and yell at you about nightgowns and
right. Be fucking weird.
Also, there's CIA stationery.
Yeah,
CIA. I mean, I guess they must. They got stationery. Do they put CIA on it?
We're the CIA.
Wouldn't you just like?
Seems pretty antithetical to the whole secrecy thing, doesn't it?
They leaving each other notes just like on the fridge in the break room.
To be frank, like the concept of the CIA using paper just sounds kind of dumb. Like a paper trail for the most secretive organization in the world.
To.
Yeah, no, at a time you had to.
It's the 90s, bruv.
But I mean stationary, like in 1991, like what are y'all pulling your typewriters out and being like, from CIA to person? Like, that seems a little...
Dear Secret Agent. Love Secret Agent.
Dear Secret Agent, how are your bad things going?
Did you spy on the thing about the stuff?
Have you succeeded
Please
on spying?
code. Goodbye. Another... I guess we just got to wrap this up eventually. I don't know how.
Oh, man.
There's an interesting article / ends up being sort of a debunking of this whole story from tricksterbook.com.
Trickster Book.
Had I loaded it up, this is where I would hit the damn son. Where'd you find that?
Damn son, where'd you find this?
Yeah, I didn't. You know the thing we talked about doing last week?
We're going to do that.
I didn't do it.
Don't worry, we're going to do it. That was on the Patreon, guys. You have to go over there to hear that too.
Also, message received on not killing still a piece of garbage.
Hey guys, other things we do on the Patreon, we culled like 33% or so of the soundboard sounds because we hadn't A, we were running out of space, and B, we hadn't done it basically since the beginning of the show.
No, yeah, not since like 2017 or whenever that was.
So we did some editing, and we edited out, hi, thanks for checking in, I'm still a piece of garbage.
It was
and everybody
not well received
from the Patreon yelled at us, so we'll bring it back.
On behalf of Ryan and myself. Oh, it's so quiet.
Oh, it's so quiet.
Oh, hold on.
What happened?
We know it's important.
Help us.
It's very important.
On behalf of Spencer and myself, we want to say...
I'm sorry.
There it is. Why are you talking? His mom coming in at the end just to chastise him. It's too perfect.
So anyway, tricksterbook.com/articles online/ Linda Cortile case.htm.
Damn, son, where'd you find this?
That's pretty good.
Not my worst impression.
Yeah, that's not bad.
I have some very bad ones, and that's not my worst one.
Anyway, what was I about to quote from them? Oh, they talk about this alleged nasal implant thing.
Oh, yeah, we haven't even gotten there.
So she's got some shit up her nose that I guess the aliens put there. She had an x-ray in November of 91, so that's, 2 years after the alleged abduction?
Yes.
A doctor whom Hopkins... because, of course, Hopkins is now involved in Linda's medical care for some reason.
You dicked her, bud.
Whom Hopkins describes as, quote, closely connected with Linda, like her doctor, took an x-ray of her head because she knew about the story of the nasal implant and because Linda spoke frequently of a problem with her nose. So Linda thought that she had been abducted prior to this 1989 incident. And that this was just one in a series of abductions that she happened to remember for whatever reason. But she had been abducted multiple times before that.
Can I do a quick aside and tell what she thought was a previous version?
Sure.
She went and saw an ear, nose, and throat specialist in 1976 because she saw a photo of herself some years after she had her first child, wherein she thought her nose looked strange, like it had either grown or shifted, and she was worried that she might have had like a tumor or like a growth in her face or under her nose or something like that. And when she went in, the specialist had discovered a buildup of cartilage and what appeared to be a surgical scalpel scar inside of Linda's nasal cavity.
Okay.
And she said she had never had a surgery of any kind performed on her or in her nose that she remembered, and her mom and sister both like verified that had been the case. And so I think there was a presumption at some point that was a early experience she had where she had been probed and or surgically operated on at the time.
Got it. So in 91, she gets this x-ray of her nose. And for whatever reason, she gets the x-ray from the doctor who took it and brings it to Budd Hopkins, who showed it to a, quote, neurosurgeon friend of his.
Bud, tell me what's in my head.
If you have an x-ray taken, you can't keep it, right? If I go to the doctor and they take an x-ray, like if I go to the dentist and they take an x-ray of my teeth, can I ask to take that home with me at the end of my appointment? Have I been missing out this whole time?
So, yes.
Yes, I have, and yes, you can?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Because I did it once.
Huh. Of what?
I fractured my wrist in high school, and I was like, what do you guys do with those? And they're like, well, we just like leave them in your file here. And I was like, what if I want it?
And they just gave it to you?
And they just gave it to me.
Huh. Okay, well, she did that, and she brought it to Budd Hopkins, and Budd Hopkins apparently showed it to a neurosurgeon friend of his who saw a sizable, clearly non-natural object in the nasal area.
Uh-oh.
I'm quoting from this tricksterbook.com article.
You hate to see it. You really do.
And they think it's an alien implant.
Of course they do.
And Hopkins went around showing a slide, or not a scan, I guess.
Sure.
A slide of the x-ray during presentations with Linda. And the object appears to be about a 1/4 inch long with what looks to be maybe a wire at one end. So skeptical me says, who took that x-ray? Why did she take it with her?
Yep.
Why did a doctor not look at it? Why does Budd Hopkins have her fucking x-rays?
Why are we trusting Budd Hopkins to analyze other people's x-rays?
And
You're too dickered, bud.
And lastly, how hard is it to put something in your nose before getting an x-ray taken?
Probably not too hard.
If you're going through weird back channels of x-ray taking.
I was going to say, it depends on who you know, I think is the primary.
So anyway, there's that, I guess.
There's also a weird report from her husband that the whole family, including her husband, and then I think they had 2 sons. Linda and her husband had 2 sons.
I don't know.
That everyone the night that she was quote unquote abducted woke up with right nasal cavity nosebleeds at the same time in the middle of the night that night.
They need to buy a humidifier.
Fun little weird fact for you there. Yeah.
Your hair's too dry, bud.
It's too much. It's too many aliens in the air tonight.
Can we? Thanks, Phil Collins.
I can feel the UFOs in the air.
Okay, good.
Go ahead.
I mean,
go ahead.
I think we're
sure. Don't tell me more.
we're up against the clock here, but
we are.
I found on the Trickster whatever the fuck .biz.
Damn.
They propose. I should actually say who wrote this article. It was Joseph Stefula, Richard Butler, and George Hansen. They
Sure.
wrote an article called "A Critique of Budd Hopkins' Case of the UFO Abduction of Linda Napolitano."
Uh-oh.
We got rid of it. It's gone.
I know. That's why
I can't.
I had to. That's why I did
can't
it.
press.
That's why I did it.
I'm sorry.
I did it because I knew he didn't have it.
So they wrote this article in, I don't know when. But one thing they suggest as a possible explanation is that there may be what they call a literary basis for elements of this story. So there is a book called, hold on, Night Eyes.
Okay.
And it is written by Garfield Reeves Stevens, which is just
Why not me?
just an incredible
Why
name.
not me?
Someone named Garfield Reeves Stevens wrote a book called Night Eyes.
Phenomenal.
And there are some odd or interesting parallels between that book and Linda Cortile's story.
Mm-hmm.
Specifically in regards to two characters in Night Eyes named Sarah and Wendy. So they are suggesting that her story may be a conflation of these two characters in this book. Intentional, unintentional, or otherwise.
That's interesting.
So they put together this little table of parallels to Linda's story and this book, Night Eyes.
Interesting.
Or Sarah and Wendy's characters, specifically in the book Night Eyes. Number 1, Linda was abducted by a UFO hovering over her high-rise apartment building in New York City. Sarah, in Night Eyes, was abducted by a UFO hovering over her high-rise apartment building in New York City. Dan and Richard claimed to have been on a stakeout and were involved in a UFO abduction in the early morning hours. In Night Eyes, 2 government agents were on a stakeout and became involved in a UFO abduction in the early morning hours. Linda was kidnapped and thrown into a car by Richard and Dan. Wendy was kidnapped and thrown into a car by Derek and Merrill.
Interesting.
Linda claimed to have been under surveillance by someone in a van. Surveillance vans are common in Night Eyes. Dan is a security and intelligence agent. Derek is an FBI agent. During the kidnapping, Dan took Linda to a safe house. During the kidnapping, Derek took Wendy to a safe house. The safe house was located on a beach in both stories. So there are just all these. There are
tons of parallels.
10 more. Yeah. Linda and Dan were abducted at the same time. I missed that part. Budd Hopkins is a UFO abduction researcher living in New York City and an author who has written books on the topic. In Night Eyes, the character Charles Edward Starr was a prominent UFO abduction researcher living in New York City and an author who had written books on the topic.
Huh.
So...
Well, that one's tough because she didn't make up Budd Hopkins existing.
Right.
But they worked together on this whole thing.
Yeah.
That's interesting. It's also interesting if you pair that book and those facts with the fact that she may have read Budd Hopkins's Intruders.
Not may. She says she did.
Or, sorry, she for sure did, but whether or not she potentially read it before she ever interacted with Budd Hopkins, if she had both this book with all of those details, plus she knew who Budd Hopkins was and all of his, work in the abduction field, I mean, she could have been playing the game the entire time.
Yes.
She could have been like, all right, I know this dude. I'm going to invent this story. We're going to go on a book tour together. I'm going to get half the rights to the book. I'm going to fucking go on presentations with this dude.
And his book sold a shitload of copies.
I'm sure it did. And back then, you probably made more off a book if you were...
I mean, people probably bought more of them.
Well, there's that too. Yeah, I think... Yeah, I mean, the least likely explanation to me is that there are 23 versions of eyewitnesses of this woman getting abducted out of her window in fucking downtown Manhattan in New York City. That's the least likely version of this I can wrap my head around.
Yep.
The most likely one to me feels like she concocted a thing and put it in front of a guy who was ready to believe a thing. And then...
Or had a financial incentive to believe a thing.
Yes, and then the two of them together concocted this fucking wild, winding tale.
However, I can't... If that's the case, I really can't blame either of them. I can't blame her for saying, you know what? If I go to this guy with this story and I sell it correctly...
Yep.
I can make myself a bunch of money. And I also can't blame him for saying... This woman came to me with this story. If I write about it, we can both make a bunch of money.
Yeah, I mean, really?
I shouldn't say I can't blame them.
I was going to say, I feel like...
I'm not saying that's an ethical thing to do. I'm saying I understand how that could happen.
Sure. I understand how that could happen too. I think... One of the things we've talked about on the show before is, I think one of the hard things for me is the people that do these versions of this stuff glamorize it, create or concoct. And I'm not necessarily saying that's exactly what happened. We don't know what happened, but like it feels sketch for a variety of reasons.
It's possible that that's what happened here.
It's possible that that's what happened. And if that is what happened, I think it's difficult because when people do that stuff, I think it detracts from the stuff that we really can't explain, the stuff we really can't figure out, the stuff that's really...
Yeah, for sure it does.
Like, strange. And I think that's unfortunate because the strange is entertaining, but we live in the society of spectacle. And so the more spectacle you can create out of a thing, the more shine you're going to get for that thing. And that being the case, people will consistently adhere towards bringing whatever their normative thing is closer to being a spectacle so that it rises above the rest. And then they get the attention or desire that they want.
And here we are in 2020 and everything's fucking going to shit.
Oh, boy. I don't know if going is the right word.
Everything's been to shit.
We've been fucking... I need... Do they make waiters that go over your head for the amount of shit we got to fucking trudge through?
Love you, bye.
All right. Love you guys. Appreciate you. Thanks for listening. Have a great week. We'll see you next week.